Hi everyone. Okay, so we're looking at this prototype. I'm not going to mention any names, but when you see your work, you'll recognize it. But really, this is for everyone to learn from these notes, and hopefully you'll find them helpful. So here we see the ice cream app, icecream.com, and this is module 4 for solving the right problems. So the very first thing that we're talking about here is the Order Now, Pay Later button. This was part of the assignment to think about some of the problems, the challenges that this app might bring up, and how you would solve for them. So one of the things I asked was for the user to be able to pay with cash. Maybe they didn't want to pay with credit card; they wanted to just pay the driver when they showed up. So that's what this experience is. So going through the experience, I noticed that the creator of this prototype talked through the process and kind of left me wanting more. So, for example, when you click Order Now, Pay Later, you have some screens. Pardon me, sorry. You have some screens that appear showing what happens. Select a payment method. Order Now, Pay Later button is still there. So I'm not sure why that button shows up a second time, but the real issue is that I don't fully understand how this interaction works. So while it is explained, I really want to see it, right? So here we have a thank you screen that says your order has been placed. Please have your cash ready when you pick up your order. Now this is the last screen, and as a user of your prototype, and as a client, even as a developer, someone who's going to be coding off of this prototype, I want to see more detail. I don't really see, for example, when I placed my order and I want to pay by cash, I get this thank you screen, but as the user, I need some kind of reassurances that I've completed my order, and that, how will the driver know it's me? Does the driver have some kind of reference number? Is it the same reference number I have? Is there a barcode that he scans? What is it that will allow me to complete this transaction in a way that makes sense to me and that's perfectly clear, right? I don't want to have any questions. I don't want to wonder after I place my order, because this interaction is kind of making me wonder. I look at thank you and I think to myself, okay, cash will be ready, pick up the order. What does that mean? Will the driver have change? Will all of these questions that come up? I could think of 100 questions that might come up. Will the driver? Does he know my address? Any of that stuff. Do I know where the driver? Where am I picking it up? Maybe you want to show me the address. You get the idea. So the goal of a prototype is to show the user, the client, the developer, anybody who's going to interact with this thing, every single scenario and how it's going to play out to the end. So if I was looking at this thing, part of the assignment for this week was to create a clickable prototype so that I can click through it. If these questions come up, there are going to be important questions that you're going to have to answer. So think about that as you're going through and you're looking at your prototype. What's missing, right? How would you be able to do this in a way that you would never have to say a word, that the user can just click through and it would make perfect sense? Because you're not going to be there when they're actually using the app to explain it to them. So you want to make sure that you're designing with the user in mind, and you won't be there. It's up to them to figure it out without your help. So keep that in mind. Okay, the next screen was this one, and the person who created this said that this screen was to account for children who might be using the app, and so they suggested large images because children really respond well to images. They even suggested having some moving images to really engage the child. So I just want to bring up an important point. While I agree that children are very visual, I think it's more important to understand that we as humans are very visual, and that everything we see, we need to make a connection to, right? We do that in our daily lives. They're called affordances, right? So, when I'm opening a door, I see a doorknob, and I get the idea. I know what I'm supposed to do as I walk up to it. I don't have to stop and think, how do I get this door open, right? So most doors are designed in a very similar way for that reason, because we are visual. We're visual learners a lot of the time. Everything we interact with, our cars, our phones, our toothbrushes, every single thing has an affordance so that essentially how to do it, even if you see it in different circumstances or if it looks a little different. That's what we want to do here, right? So we want to make this easy. We want to make it not easy, but in the instructions it said, what if children want to use it, right? So how are we going to account for that? And something a child uses, technology that if you have children, you'll know that they pick it up very, very quickly. This is what you want to do in your design overall. So having large images, having, big buttons, having very little bit of text that just gets right to the point, that's really key to allow your users to have an engaging experience, because they want simplicity, right? People using this app are going to be on the go. They want to use it very, very quickly. They want to get in and get out. They don't want to have to spend time thinking about it. So this type of screen is not necessarily for kids. If you design something for kids and you think it's simple for a kid, then that's great, because that means an adult will probably have an easier time using it too. And as far as moving images, I think we want to avoid that just completely, 100%. I don't think moving images is anything we want to put into our designs, unless specifically we have a video in our app that we need people to see. Otherwise, it's a distraction, and it's just going to take away from the experience rather than enhance the experience. And it's also, as a business owner, it could distract the user from actually making a purchase. So the first thing I want is to get rid of that, because I don't want my users thinking about anything except hitting that buy now button. One other thing I want to mention here is throughout this prototype, I don't see any prices. So on the previous screen and on this screen, throughout the experience, from what I've seen, there's no prices. So I have no idea how much anything is. I want to be able to see an item. I want to be able to see what it's called, and its price. If you feel there's a need for ingredients, have a link that says ingredients. Maybe it has a little window or something that comes down in front of the screen that shows me the ingredients, or maybe the item itself. Maybe the item itself expands to show me the ingredients, or maybe the ingredients are right underneath the product. Think about how you might do that, again, without taking the user away from what they're actually trying to do. So if the user comes here and they're trying to buy ice cream, they're not really coming here to look for ingredients necessarily. I mean, it's important, but in that case, you might want to have a section that just talks about ice cream for people with allergies, and then you can cover it by showing just those products in that section, right? So that's another type of scenario, and that's another problem you might want to solve for. So again, Module 4, solving the right problems, is really all about solving these types of problems, coming up in your head with every possible scenario, every possible challenge, obstacle that's going to get in the way. Think that through as far as you can. Lastly, we have this functionality that is about safety, right? So I talked about one of the big problems that you want to account for in your design is the idea that people might be using your app while they're driving. Now, I really want to emphasize this, because I use driving because that's a really extreme example of people using their phones in an essentially dangerous situation. But think about it. We use our phones everywhere we go, with everything we do. I mean, it's gotten to the point where people use their phones when they're exercising, when they're walking, crossing the street. So, we're doing a lot of things that, are really distracting us and taking us away from the things that we really should be focusing on. And driving is definitely one of them. People do use their phones while they're driving, whether we want to admit it or not. And if they are going to use their phones while they're driving, we want to make it safer for them. So what the designer of this prototype did here was they introduced voice search, which is great. I think that's a great idea. I think the idea is that you want to be able to use your voice. I have a GPS app called Waze that will not let me type if I'm driving. I don't exactly know how it knows this, but but it doesn't allow me to type. I can only speak into it. So that's a really great feature. Another thing I want to mention, similar to my previous comments about having this play out to the end, when I do tap, what happens? Does the keyboard pop up? Is there a microphone image that shows? How do I know that I'm actually recording, right? So this is where it really comes down to the details. The work we do is highly, highly detailed, and we need to fill in those holes, right? There's a term called tweening. And it was very big when Flash was a big app, and it's used in animation circles. What it means is the key animators will draw the key scenes, right? So they'll draw a character if he's waving his hand. They'll have his hand in one position, and then he'll have his hand in the final position, and then they send their key frames off to the tweeners, which basically means these are the guys who draw what's in between, right? So that's where tween comes from. And for us, as prototypers, we don't have the luxury of sending it off to a team who can do the tweening. We need to be able to display every single last screen that is going to occur so that the person using this, and if you create a clickable prototype, you want to make sure that the user is going to experience as real an interaction as possible. So fill in those holes. If you're going to show something like tap, voice tap, I want to see that played out. And also, when I look here, for example, how the words are, turning to, there's a little word down here, it's called a widow. Maybe you want to use smaller fonts so that this is on one line, right? This becomes harder to read if it's now, all the way over here. So think about that in your design, right? Is it easy to read? At a glance, can I see this, right? Just making the text larger doesn't necessarily accomplish that. You really want to make sure it's neat and that everything looks the same, right? So this should all be on one line, right? So figure out how to get that on one line. It's really about aesthetics. And we're not talking visual design here. We're talking just basic aesthetics, right? So how can I recognize something when I first see it and make that as easy and clean as possible for the user?